Good morning, everyone. Hope you're all doing well. Just thought I'd take a look at this today because, as you know, those of you that know me, I like to stay ahead of the curve on new buzz phrases and descriptions of all the evils in our world on the off chance that they might sometime in the near future become common parlance. And I saw an article posted today from the New York Times, which promises to tell me something new about something very old. Let's look at it, shall we? This isn't your old toxic masculinity. It has taken an insidious new form. Woo! By Alex McElroy. Mr. McElroy. Oh, sorry. MX McElroy. Okay. MX McElroy. It's the Maximum McElroy, is the author of the novel The Atmospherians, about two friends who start a cult to reform problematic men. Oh, joy. Toxic masculinity is so 2017. It hasn't disappeared, of course. Of course. But in the years since hashtag Me Too, many men have been trying to drop the stoicism and anger that have long warped masculinity. Ah, yes, stoicism, a warped masculinity. Some are seeking therapy. Others have enrolled in workshops and men's groups in an effort to get in touch with their feelings and become better men. How could you possibly become better men? Men are toxic. You don't want to become better men. You want to become worse men, you see? For better or worse, everyone you know is watching Ted Lasso. So the strong silent type is losing some of its allure. Yeah. Ask most women about that one. Because, most women I know just love weepy men. My personal relationship to masculinity is fraught. I would never have imagined Alex McElroy. Expressing my true gender identity did not immediately fix my relationship with vulnerability, but it led me to delve deeper into what vulnerability is and how it can operate. As it happens, vulnerability was having a cultural moment as the topic of popular TED Talks and the focus of groups invested in helping men evolve, such as the Mankind Project and Everyman, whose men's retreats echoed earlier movements encouraging self-reflection in men, including Robert Bly's mythopoetic men's movement, unquote. Oh, TED Talks. Oh, I feel like I'm reading one. It has been very exciting to watch as more men embrace vulnerability. At a men's group meeting in 2019, I saw men like those I knew growing up taking responsibility for their actions and feelings. Yeah, because as we know, most men take no responsibility for their actions or their feelings. This was far from the new normal, but at least men were coming together to talk. Because as we know, men never talk to each other. I began to feel hopeful about the state of masculinity. I think you began to feel comfortable around people who felt as uncomfortable about masculinity as you do. But maybe I'm just projecting. But my hope has begun to diminish as I've watched male vulnerability curdle into something toxic. Let's call it petulant vulnerability. There it is, everyone. There it is. Wait for the book titled Petulant Vulnerability to come out any day now, probably after The Atmospherians. Think of the boyfriend professing loneliness to ensure his partner never sees their friends, which, of course, a woman would never do. Or the hundreds of texts and anecdotes of so-called soft boys collected on the @BeamMeUpSoftBoy Instagram account, which I check out every day, don't you? Men who express their feelings the way avalanches share snow, often as a form of manipulation or passive aggression. which is something, of course, that women never do. On the HBO show Succession, Kendall Roy professes his empathy with the plight of abused women only to feed his narcissistic desires. Oh, wow. Which is something that women never do. And also, as we know, that is an example of what all men do. And the film Promising Young Woman showcased the horror of the nice guy whose sensitivity slides stealthily into misogyny and abuse. Oh, you mean Promising Young Woman? The film that's basically just a giant man-hating murder spree? I mean, cathartic as it is. Uh-huh. So your two examples are fictional characters written to be exactly those things and to bring about those reactions from the audience. Oh, okay. There have been some extreme examples in high profile court cases of the past year. Oh, really? The courtroom tears of Kyle Rittenhouse, who was later acquitted in the deaths of two men he shot and the wounding of another, and Travis McMichael, who, along with his father and a neighbor, was convicted of the murder of Ahmaud Arbery, whose public displays of were public displays of petulant vulnerability. Really? Kyle Rittenhouse breaking down on the stand was an example of petulant vulnerability? It wasn't an example of post-traumatic stress disorder or anxiety or anything else? You think he was faking it? You think it was all manipulative? Really? Okay. Well, that's one opinion, I suppose. They show strikingly how this aggrieved, self-righteous mindset let's try that one again. They show strikingly how this aggrieved, self-righteous mindset privileges one's own vulnerability over that of others. The crying killer doesn't recognize the vulnerability of his victim. Okay, so let me just make sure I get this straight. And I know we're only about 3/4 of the way through this thing. All right, so men being stoic and or angry is bad. Men being vulnerable is good. But men's vulnerability can be used as a tool of manipulation, which is bad. Well, how do you know when a vulnerable man is being honest or when he's being genuine? Because you've said or indicated here that Kyle Rittenhouse was being disingenuous on the stand with his outburst. Okay. Now, I'm not a mind reader. You could be right. I've heard a whole bunch of people who have dealt with post-traumatic stress disorder tell me that the way that he was breathing, his reactions, his body indicated something beyond mere manipulation. And as a true crime buff, I have watched and seen and had analyzed for me multiple individuals who were faking sorrow for the sake of manipulation or deception. Now, again, I'm no expert, but those same experts have looked at the Kyle Rittenhouse video and said either he's an Oscar level actor or he's actually suffering from a post-traumatic episode. But it's okay. You think he was being manipulative, all right? How do you know that? What about that incident? I didn't see the Travis McMichael one, so I can't compare, but I would love to know what about that situation specifically to you said, this is fake, this is deceptive, this is not true. I don't think he'll tell us, but I'm sure we'll find out. No, actually, I don't think we'll find out. Continuing on. The aftermath of last year's January 6th attack on the Capitol, because as we know, every day is January 6th, was a festival of petulant vulnerability. Oh, even amongst all the women? Okay. While the attack itself was violent and wrathful, many in the mostly male mob, who screamed obscenities or threw heavy objects at police officers that day, later wept as they expressed shame, offered excuses, or complained about jobs and friends they lost. One rioter even blamed Fox-itis for his actions. His lawyer argued that months of watching Fox News had destabilized him to the point where he started believing untruths. Classic toxic masculinity was on full display when those would-be heroes rallied to, quote, save America, unquote, on January 6th, but some became hapless patsies once they were held accountable. Their capes became baby blankets. Okay, so far you've brought up, let's see, fake character, or fake, well, I should say fictional characters, and people who have been charged with crimes. Okay, all right, where in the first instance, credibility can't be challenged because they're just written that way, and in the second instance, credibility has to be challenged because, well, that's due process. Do you have any, like, I don't know, real world examples, like regular people or something? I don't know. Petulant vulnerability is not, of course, confined to men. Petulant vulnerability is not confined to men. What did you say a couple of paragraphs back? But my hope has begun to diminish as I've watched male vulnerability curdle into something toxic. Let's call it petulant vulnerability. Why? How could it possibly not be confined to men if it is an outgrowth of toxic male vulnerability? But okay, you go on. An example can be found in the case of Amy Cooper, the woman who was filmed falsely reporting to the police that, quote, an African American man is threatening my life, unquote, her voice sounding breathless and panicked after a bird watcher in Central Park asked her to leash her dog. What is real vulnerability? I have no idea at this point because you haven't told us what a bad vulnerability is versus a good one. I mean, questioning someone's credibility in a situation where their credibility is questionable, regardless of whether they're being vulnerable or not, is one thing. But you need to give us some examples of, like, just everyday on the street vulnerability versus bad vulnerability. Brene, I hope I'm saying that right. Brene Brown, a researcher whose work on vulnerability has made her a celebrity in some circles, I'll stipulate, I guess, defines it as uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure in her 2013 book, Daring Greatly: How the Courage to be Vulnerable Transforms the Way We Live, Love, Parent, and Lead, unquote. Okay. Petulant vulnerability, however, uses the language of vulnerability as a cudgel. If true vulnerability means accepting change, personal fallibility, and the human condition of reliance on others, petulant vulnerability feigns emotional fragility as a means of retaining power. Emotional manipulation is not a new concept there, Alex. I don't know if you're aware of that. Your fancy new name for it, which doesn't actually mean anything, doesn't help, but okay. If true vulnerability seems scary, it is. Oh, really? Really? Being vulnerable is a scary situation? Oh. But that doesn't make expressing it any less necessary. For men, as for everyone. Why are you confined to men then? If being vulnerable, authentically vulnerable, is a healthy thing to do, and everybody should be doing it, what does any of this have to do with men specifically? What if on January 5th, 2021, a man upset by Donald Trump's electoral defeat had confessed to friends and loved ones that he was afraid and that he felt he was losing control in a world he believed no longer valued him? I don't know, Alex. Has anyone ever done that before? Has any man ever done that before? Have you ever done that before? Is this not a glorified cry for help in that sense? What if he had sat with those feelings, cried if he wanted to, and discussed how to chart his path in a changing landscape? That would have been vulnerable. Well, maybe a man did do that. I don't know, and you don't know. But what's the difference? What if I don't feel vulnerable? I mean, what if I just don't feel vulnerable? What if I have, a passing sense of self-confidence? What if I sort of have a cynical or sardonic outlook on the world, and What'll happen will happen. I'm a little fatalistic, but I'm a little confident. I have to show you my vulnerability or else you won't believe that I'm somehow not toxic. I have to roll over and show you my soft underbelly or else you'll think I'm an enemy. Hmm. Okay. This kind of vulnerability can be difficult, of course. Of course! Even as men's groups committed to positive change gain prominence, our society still broadly enforces traditional masculinity norms and restrictions. And online, there are plenty of spaces where extremely toxic behavior is encouraged and applauded. You mean like diminishing all men down to villains and toxic, angry uh, shooters and killers and things? I mean, your your uh, your examples above, okay? Your examples above. In the first place, you picked out a fictional character who is a narcissistic rich boy, right? Who has all sorts of problems and is written that way. Your second example was from a movie where all of the men in the movie are written to be villains, effectively. Villains that feel satisfying when the protagonist takes them on or takes them out. And then you pick people who were put on trial for crimes, regardless of the outcome. You know, people that were involved in violent situations as a consequence of either their own choices or the circumstances around them. January 6th, Kyle Rittenhouse, Ahmaud Arbery. So this is not a reflection of all men, Alex. I don't know if you know this, but conforming to what you want men to be so you can feel more comfortable about yourself does not make everybody else a villain or flawed or somehow broken. I mean, you might feel that way and you may look upon others that way, but it's not necessarily reality. So, what's to be done? Oh, sorry, I missed a sentence here. In incel forums, for example, yes, incel forums. There's an objective source of information, Alex. Rather than working through the pain of being sexually rejected, men lash out at the women they feel they deserve, occasionally resulting in horrific violence. Uh, yes, Alex. If you go and check out cauldrons of self hatred and low self esteem, you're probably not going to find the healthiest outlook on the world. But also, that does not represent the world. So, what's to be done? Though men's discussion groups and more nuanced male leads on TV cannot, on their own, shift our expectations of manhood, the fact that they exist and are gaining popularity counts for something. What you think Kendall Roy manifests a positive change in manhood? But who are you talking? What you mean, Ted Lasso? I've never seen Ted Lasso. I keep hearing about it, but I've never watched it. And somehow I've survived. I don't know. Quote, men cannot change if there are no blueprints for change, unquote. Bell Hooks wrote in her 2005 book, The Will to Change Men, Masculinity, and Love, where she uses feminist thinking to show men how to overcome their conditioning. Man, when I want to know how to be a better man, the first place I go to is a woman. Yeah. Who's never met me. The hard part is yet to come. Change is taxing and boring and scary. It requires humility and vulnerability. Right. So if you have any, I don't know, questions, doubts, or opposition to your ideas, well, I have no humility and I don't know how to be vulnerable. And I'm obviously toxic. Right. The real stuff, not the cheap imitation. And it requires letting go of what some men feel entitled to. The rewards, however, will make this effort worthwhile. Okay, well, what am I entitled to? And what are the rewards? You're not going to tell me what the rewards are? You're not going to tell me what the carrot is that I'm supposed to be chasing? Okay. Quote, to know love, Miss Hooks writes, men must be able to let go the will to dominate, unquote. Yes, men, the only way that you can know love is to give up all sense of control over yourself or the world. You need to bare your feelings to everyone at all times. You need to feel doubt about your own ability and your own sense of strength. You need to capitulate and capitulate and continue capitulating if you are to ever know love. Otherwise, you will never be loved. Self confidence, assertiveness, stoicism, none of these things bring love or respect or success in life. Just curl up into a ball and cry, and everyone will be there to give you a big old hug. Well, that was the article from Mix Alex McElroy. And yeah, so petulant vulnerability. I'm looking forward to the TEDx talk on it soon, as well as the book, telling all men how to be better men by rejecting what it means sometimes to be a man, while also conflating the worst parts of human behavior with masculinity, because only masculinity can be toxic, and women can never do anything that's manipulative or insidious or bad or anything, I guess. Okay. Well, then, everyone, thank you for joining me. I wanted to keep this short and sweet because I have to get back to other things. If you'd like to hear more from me, you can find me tonight on this channel at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern for another episode of TED Excellence, where I will once again delve into the wonderful world of off-brand TED Talks. And hopefully someday, Alex McElroy will give a TEDx talk on this very subject, and we can look at it together. Everyone, thank you for joining me. Hope you're all having a good day. And until next time, how do I close one of these things? Oh, right.